what an interesting way to start the week. We've broken quite a few streaks, actually, which is pretty interesting. And I'm going to show some figures here. But if anybody else has any tickers or strategies that they want us to look at, feel free to shout those out, and I can put these slides together sort of live on the show. So if you're like, oh, that's cool, but let me see it with Mara, just, shout that out, and we'll try to take that into account, look at everything that everybody wants to see. First off is SPY, the S&P 500, just flirting ever so slightly with all-time highs. And it's been doing so for the last couple of weeks, unlike the Qs and actually not the Russell, but unlike the Qs, hasn't actually reached that all-time high point since 2022, the beginning of 2022. So I'm curious to see, we've been inching ever close to that point, getting kind of teased with it. But we'll see if we wind up reaching that anytime soon. We were sort of on track to do that, and SPY has broken that streak. So we did actually have like 9 consecutive up weeks when we measure Monday to Monday, which is what this code does, or Monday to Tuesday in the case of a holiday, I think. Or no, I'm sorry, Monday to Friday in the case of a holiday. We were coming off 9 consecutive up weeks, and now we've reversed a little bit. We've reversed a little bit and broken that streak, and we can see the same thing with actually a couple of other market indices, but also some of the commodities as well. For the Russell, kind of all over the place. Not a ton of big moves that we've seen. About 40% in the last 2 weeks have been big moves, but we've seen some of them to the downside, a couple to the upside, a little bit of a mixed bag of nuts in here for sure, which I'm quite happy about because that is making my neutral position very happy. We have the Qs as well. A little bit of a slowdown in the Qs. We saw a really strong rally in this underlying, and it's since calmed down a little bit. We're pretty much at a standard deviation move today. A little bit of a breather, a little bit of a reprieve after the pretty crazy rally that we've seen in the Qs, which was about a standard deviation move to the downside. Also coming off a pretty significant week, we had 9 consecutive up weeks as well in the Qs, and we've finally broken that, which seems like kind of a long time coming, to be honest. We were really strong rally in this thing. We're kind of seeing a little bit of a reversal now. As with Apple, this is another one down. I think it's maybe even down more, but when I put this code in, it was down 3.15%, which was a 1.3 standard deviation move. It might have even sold off a little bit since then, but it is following a really quite the rally, to be totally honest, of all the tech stocks. So this one hit 14 times in the last 252 days. So if we look back at the last year, it hit all-time highs 14 different times and kept surpassing them, even leading into the last couple of weeks. So kind of not surprised to see a little bit of a reversal, a little bit move back to the downside, a little bit calming down, just a tiny itty-bitty little bit, but kind of curious to see how some of these like more troubling long-term analyses might impact the stock. So that should be interesting to see. Also seeing a little bit of a reversal in natural gas. We were off of a 6-week down streak in natural gas. So it had sold off pretty significantly. We've reversed a little bit since then, a little bit of a green day, but we're coming off a pretty big streak to the downside. And since we're up a little bit, it's kind of nice. Got Bitcoin up 8.66%. It might even be higher. But the Bitcoin futures, it was a 2 standard deviation move today. So definitely seeing a lot of movement across the crypto space. But you know what's upset is Coinbase. We had pretty big rally at the end of last week, and since then have sold off since the 29th and the 2nd. So Friday and today, which is absolutely wonderful. We're at a standard deviation move right now in Coinbase, and we might have sold off even more so since then. And this is another one that we're seeing a reversal where it was coming off in 8 consecutive up weeks, a streak, 8 weeks, which is crazy. And it's since reversed a little bit since then. The correlation between Coinbase and BITO, I'm using the ETF here as opposed to the futures, just so that the time frame is the same, but BITO is pretty heavily correlated to Bitcoin. So that's what I'm kind of using for a proxy here. And its correlation is 0.42, which is down from its typical value of 0.6. So it's a little bit lower correlation than usual, not completely uncorrelated or anything like that, but we're seeing a little bit of some of those disjointed movements today, which is so much fun. I mean, definitely like long-term bullish on the sector, I think, just as the technology gets a little bit less stigmatized. You don't need, but having a couple SBF situations, having a couple Three Arrows Capital, having a couple corrective events can sometimes even be good for the industry long term. So I'm making me a little bit more optimistic that we're getting more regulatory clarity, that there's a higher standard in terms of what we expect these business practices to be like for these big companies. And I don't know, we're just going to have to wait and see. All I know is that my Coinbase position is pretty upset today. You know what else is upset? My Moderna position. Yay! So this one, we've had a couple big moves, up 5%, almost 6%, up 4%, up 3%, up 3.5%, down 1 point, or almost 2%. And then today we're at nearly a 2 standard deviation move. So Moderna is, it's not upset, it's actually quite happy, but my position is upset. This is coming off a pretty significant 8 consecutive up weeks for Moderna. So this is kind of one that's kind of flown under the radar the last couple of weeks. I've definitely been keeping note of it as its implied volatility has been quite high, but overall, I've just, yeah, this will be interesting to see. And this was recorded at 8.88%, which I think should be lucky, so make a wish. But it might have even gone up since then. So just an interesting one to watch for sure, which is great. I'm not sure if anybody else in here is trading Moderna or anything like that. So I just updated the stats. So we are at a 3 standard deviation move to the upside in Moderna, and my Iron Condor is in the money. So this is great. I love that for us. Oh, rip, dude. Lots of fun companies going to the cybersecurity space. Also, this is a Luis favorite. Palo Alto Networks, PNW. I'll add that to the list, and then CRWD. Add that to the list. There you go. So if you want to talk about out of control, man, this is a little bit out of control for sure. So in the last 252 days, so in the last year, basically, this thing has surpassed all-time highs 31 times. So other people seem to be on the Palo Alto Networks train. Kind of, this one's been flying under the radar a little bit, but really interesting performance. We're seeing something like, I don't even think NVIDIA did this well in terms of surpassing all-time highs, at least looking at it from this metric. So really, really wild rally in this thing, pretty much straight vertical. We're looking at 3 seems to be the magic number across some of these slides. So you'll notice that we're on 3 consecutive down weeks for Palo Alto Networks. But that's coming off, again, a pretty significant rally in this thing. And we're seeing something kind of similar across a lot of these. So with Crowdstrike, for example, coming off of a consecutive up-week streak of 6 weeks, which is pretty impressive, not the longest ever. And we've recently gone down 3 consecutive weeks to the downside. But again, that's following a very crazy rally, kind of similar to what we're seeing in a couple of these other like bigger tech names, for example. So that's pretty interesting. We're not at all-time highs yet. We haven't surpassed it, but again, we're seeing something kind of similar in Bitcoin, where we're seeing just a lot, like pretty strong trajectory getting back to that point, back to those November 2021 levels is when it hit all-time highs last. We're seeing something similar where we had, again, 6 consecutive up weeks for ZS, and now we're followed by 3 consecutive down weeks, so 3 is the magic number. So again, a little bit of a reversal, but that's after we've had quite the rally over the last couple of months at this point, actually. Pretty interesting. We're not near all-time highs. It last peaked in its all-time highs again in 2021, so kind of interesting to see that all these kind of peaked at around the same time, at least the ones that we're looking at. And we're not there yet, but we're making pretty staggering process to get back up there. So this one is going to be interesting, again, to watch for sure. We'll look at a lot of these names throughout the year. This will be like a fun what to watch in 2024 list, I guess. With ZS, its returns volatility is quite high. It's 3.9%. So today we're actually not at a standard deviation move, even though it's down 3.3% today. So pretty significant move, but this thing has shown quite a lot of volatility. So it's not that volatile for this particular underlying. So with TTD, its return volatility is also quite high, around 4.5%. And we are seeing a little bit of a sell-off. So we're down almost 2%, down 1.5%. But for this particular underlying, it's not like the craziest amount of volatility just based on its historic behavior. We're also on our 3rd consecutive down week for TTD. So that's our magic number that we're seeing in a lot of these. And definitely not showing the same degree of rally that we're seeing across some of these other underlyings. And then finally, Okta, which down 2.67%, but for something as volatile as this, it doesn't even scratch a standard deviation. It's about 3/4 of a standard deviation move to the downside. We had one big move of 4% on the 21st of December, and since then it's calmed down a little bit of a reversal, but still some interesting price action in this one to watch. We kind of watched it throughout 2023. I want to pay a little bit more attention to this one throughout 2024. So this one's pretty interesting. All of these I think are pretty interesting. The one that I think like Palo Alto Networks especially, just based on how investors seem to be feeling about this, I think this is going to be quite the name to watch throughout 2024, sorry. So thank you guys for suggesting this. Really interesting to look at. And if you have any other ones, let us know.